All right, Lords of the Fallen 2023 review from IGN. I feel like IGN's reviews are, I don't know, they're all over the place. I feel like they're definitely different. I guess it depends on who the reviewer is. I don't know who reviewed this one, but let's give it a peep. My initial thoughts on Lords of the Fallen, at least from what I've seen, is that it is vastly improved from the first one. It is a much, oh, is it 2013, 2014 from the first one? The first one had some nasty camera shake problems, lots of feedback problems. Yeah, and there were just, I don't know, the combat felt really weird. I think this is a big improvement, but I still have gripes about what I've seen here. I think there is definitely some hit feedback and some weightiness that doesn't exist. Like, it feels like sometimes the animations for the swings don't line up with the hit, or when you hit the boss, they don't recoil or react at the same time. Everything feels a little delayed or a little chunky, and you know, some of that stuff doesn't feel like it's as you'd expect from other Souls-likes, like we've seen with Lies of P or with Elden Ring or, you know, whatever else. But let's see what IGN has to say.
If at first you don't succeed, try again. While
Oh my God, what a difference,
2014's
dude.
Lords of the Fallen was one of
This is
the
Travis.
earliest to take a stab at recreating From Software's Lightning in a Bottle, it didn't quite hit that high mark.
Yeah, so you can definitely tell, like, look at the difference in this. This looks like an old school, like, God of War game. And I'm not trying to, like, intentionally, so it was 2419. I'm not trying to, like, intentionally knock it, but at the same point, I think it definitely, you could tell it was like a first title for a studio who may be trying to get the rings. And to be honest, the sequel coming 9 years after the first one, you would expect it to be massively improved.
Bottle, it didn't quite hit that high mark. Nearly a decade and about a million Souls-like copycats later, there's perhaps no better time for its follow-up to take a second swipe. And thankfully, this new Lords of the Fallen confidently lands its strike. Its dual world is absolutely
show you just from this
awesome
combat
to explore.
here.
Build crafting is diverse and complex, and combat is so smooth and satisfying that I'm willing to forgive all the ways it cribs from its contemporaries.
But do you see how, like, just if you could just slow it down and look at it, I feel like as far as like the visceral aspect of the combat, it feels like everything's just like a couple frames off or doesn't have the same weight to it. It's like when you hit
from its contemporaries,
right? It feels like the sound is not super satisfying, and also comes a little bit like there's like a little hitch there.
Some from its
When
contemporaries.
the sound doesn't hit at the same time, it feels like it's just a little off.
Some pretty severe performance issues and bugs, as well as disappointing.
Also, let's look at why are we fighting Joan of Arc? True. Let's look at the store for it. Yeah, let's see what the reviews are saying about it. Lords of the Fallen. View page. Mixed reviews. 43% are positive. 57 are negative. I'm guessing this is probably just performance, as is usually the case with PC games. Having issues with performance, change reflection. Make sure to download the, performance, NVIDIA, graphics driver, download the Game Ready drivers. It's beautiful. I might come back and try the game again, but really disappointed with both performance and actual gameplay. It's Lords of the Crashing. Lords of the Crashing. Beautiful at the cost of FPS, not playable. Can't play, can't get past character creation. Lords of Disappointment. Yet another game that ruins. Good game. Thumbs up. 0.9 hours on record. All right. So there's the stage.
Easy boss fights means this latest thrust isn't quite a fatal blow, but even so, I expect to spend many more hours impaling enemies and exploring every nook of its cleverly split world.
It looks great, and it has a mechanic that is like, it's kind of like the Medium. If you ever play that, it's like there's like a dark world and a light world, and you go into like this spirit world and you go back and forth, and there's like puzzles and mechanics that go along with that. And you also have kind of like a Sekiro second life. If you die in the living world, you go into the dark world and you're still alive, and you have that life, and you have to die in the shadow world again in order to lose that life. So
Lords of the Fallen is yet another action RPG Souls-like. complete
And
with
it
an
has the
unsettling
guard block,
fantasy
the
setting,
guard regain.
other players invading your game, and of course, lots of dying. A lot is borrowed from FromSoft classics, but there's also quite a bit of unique stuff to get excited about too. That includes—
Which, by the way, I think that it's perfectly fine and actually really cool to have people go into existing genres and make love letters to games that they enjoy. I think no one should ever feel like if there's a fast follow for a game that they like, that they should be upset that that's happening, right? Like if you like Dark Souls and you like Demon Souls and you like Lies of P and you like Elden Ring and you like all of these games, why would you not like more games being made in that genre of that type so you have more things to play?
Things like some super cool dual reality
but you should have something unique
or
to
a
try and help
nifty
set
magical
it
lamp
apart.
that lets you flay the souls right out of your enemies. Those who played the original Lords of the Fallen will definitely hear NPCs talk about some familiar setting lore.
The time of Adir's righteous return.
Reviews should reflect the quality of story, gameplay, replayability, but that's just my opinion. Yeah, I feel like there should be a different category for it. I feel like the game being downvoted because it doesn't run well isn't super fair, but it is something that should bubble to the top and should be made aware for people that are wanting to buy the game, right? You should know if you're trying to get the game on PC that it's running poorly for most people. And that should be part of the initial process of reviewing. It just isn't reviewing the game itself. And oftentimes the people that write bad reviews because of technical issues, if those technical issues get sorted out later on, they don't go back and change their reviews. They leave their negative reviews there, for most of the people do. And then it just kind of drags down the review rating of that game, even if the technical problems have been fixed.
Or see really cool and recognizable sights like this giant outstretched
cool
hand
vista.
of a fallen
The
god
hand
in the
from the
distance.
first one.
But this is essentially a reboot rather than a sequel. The fresh story it tells using refurbished bits is much better than its predecessor too, with a world that feels much more fleshed out. There's some interesting characters here and there, and some cool lore as you meet various factions that you can side with or work against.
You know full well the agony Gerlinda can inflict on you.
Even if that stuff sometimes feels buried under a mountain of generic dark fantasy gobbledygook. Though Lords of the Fallen certainly borrows a lot from its genre peers
this is like
in this
the
way,
dual world.
it's
Isn't that cool? I think that's a very
dark fantasy
unique concept
gobbledygook.
that's fun to
Though
mix
Lords
in.
of the Fallen certainly
You can like
borrows
peer
a
into
lot
the world, and I think it's something that like not too many games have tried. Luigi's Mansion, The Medium, sometimes like platformers do it a lot, but in general, this kind of dual world thing is tough because it's hard to make it perform because you have double the costs of environment and game objects, but in general is very cool.
From its genre peers in this way, its biggest original idea is also its best. Axiom,
So now they're in the
physical
shadow world.
land most people perceive, lies atop this ghostly world of dark abominations and
Umbral.
creepy eyeballs called Umbral, which you can swap to using a magic lantern. As you run around killing bosses and kicking scrubs off of ledges, you'll need to navigate both, which adds a really novel new way to explore the environment. For example, a broken bridge might block your progress in the normal world, but be crossable in Umbral. This mechanic has enormous impact on nearly every aspect of Lords of the Fallen, from combat where normally imperceivable enemies become a major threat
good.
when you
I think
enter
it's still a
Umbral,
little
to
scuffed,
exploration,
but it looks
since
good.
Each area essentially has two versions, warranting multiple runs through the same section to see what you missed.
Lords of the Fallen?
It's a shame, though, that Lords of the Fallen doesn't quite seem capable of supporting its cross-dimensional ambitions from a technical standpoint, as it suffers from some pretty serious performance issues. Even with my GeForce RTX 4090 GPU and Ryzen 9 7950X 3D CPU, I encountered stuttering and dropped frames on a regular basis,
very common,
especially after prolonged sessions. And those problems were shared in some form or another by everyone I played with.
Oh my God.
It's especially frustrating when lost frames lead to taking hits I otherwise may have avoided, or when my co-op partners got killed after their game turned into a slideshow during multiplayer. I'm not usually one to whinge about performance benchmarks or less than perfect frame rates.
Maybe the problem is the price.
These were so consistent.
I mean, in general, anytime you do a dual world like this, you are dramatically increasing the performance costs of every environment and gameplay interaction significantly, right? That's kind of because you obviously have to have, to some degree, both environments loaded at the same time, because you can pull out the lantern at any time and look to see what's on the other side. You also have unique enemies that spawn on one or the other, which means you may be loading and processing those enemies that might be in the umbral when you're in the living world, and vice versa. And you have ways to attack and interact with those enemies, so they have to be on at the same time. There might be collisions you have to constantly check against, because a lot of the puzzles in this game, maybe there's no bridge there in the real world, but in the umbral there is. And so you have to make sure that there's no collision for you to stand on when you're in the living world, but that collision gets loaded dynamically when you're moving across it in the umbral. So all of that puts a lot of heavy performance requirements. And that's why usually most people try to avoid it. The Medium, the horror game, had the same problem, crazy performance problems. It's just a very big load, and you'd have to have technical wizards on your platform team to figure out how to make that load properly without being a slog for a lot of people.
And impossible
but it
to
is
ignore.
Very cool.
It was like eating a delicious meal with a severe toothache. Thankfully, Lords of the Fallen's otherwise lovely areas are still a ton of fun to explore when its frame rate manages to behave. From the fiery ashes of the city of Calrath to the treacherous steps of a monastery in the mountains.
Whoa.
Level design is some of the best of the genre in recent memory, with interesting and
Travis, that is a bold statement.
Often breathtaking environments, tons of secrets to discover, and loads of unique enemies to fight, introduced one at a time via mini-boss fights throughout the roughly 40-hour campaign.
Oh, wait. Do you see what I mean? Like. Okay, look at these hits. Doesn't it, like, it just feels like they're all wielding pool noodles. You know what I mean?
Campaign.
It's like they're doing like Renaissance Fair play fighting.
Taking down armies of wretched...
Like the combination of the hit feedback, the visual feedback, the audio feedback, the VFX all coming together, I feel like it just doesn't have a lot of weight to it.
Skeletal abominations is a lively whirlwind of blades and flails being swung and parried, making it play more smoothly than the vast majority of its peers.
And also, like, he's getting parries there, man. Like, those are parries.
Lively whirlwhirlwind of blades and flails
Why doesn't it feel
being
like
swung
it?
and parried, making it play more smoothly than the vast...
Why is the parry sound a thwap?
Majority...
You know?
Of its peers, even if that dance feels extremely conventional at this point. You can be a brawny bruiser wielding the all-reliable sword and board, this quick and precise Bloodborne dude, or a variety of ranged magic users with cool but by-the-numbers abilities like covering levels in fire and lava or blessing you and your allies with health-regenerating effects. It's also great that many of the areas you'll fight your way through are legitimately challenging, often filled with elite enemies who swarm you with devastating attacks in claustrophobic environments that have numerous ways to get yourself killed. Really, the only issue is that enemies are as dumb as a bag of hair, which isn't exactly a unique problem in the genre, but it's always amusing to see these morons try to figure out how to navigate the world's geometry, only to stand in place as you stab them repeatedly. Not content with just being awesome for exploration, your magical lamp and its relationship to the parallel umbral realm is also quite useful in combat, primarily because you can use its soul flay ability to rip out an enemy's soul, stopping them in their tracks and providing ample time to dish out damage.
What's cool about this too is you can drag out their soul in any direction, and once after a short delay, they get teleported to where their soul is, which means you can knock enemies off the ledge using the soul mechanic.
Also, some enemies will have supernatural resistance that makes them nigh invincible, the only remedy being using your lamp to cast light on nearby hidden eyeballs to strip them of that protection. Finding ways to play with the dual reality swapping during combat really drives home just how dope that mechanic is.
I agree.
Obviously, no Souls-like would be complete without epic boss fights against disgusting monstrosities, and Lords of the Fallen has some cool ones.
Judge Cleric.
Unlike the levels preceding them, they're not very challenging at all. Every boss comes at you with slow and telegraphed moves, surprisingly reasonable health bars, and plenty of breaks in the action to heal up thanks to the simple AI, making death a pretty rare occurrence against them.
I have seen that
it's still entertaining
as well.
To take
Plenty of the bosses seeming, other than the tutorial boss, seeming very easy to pick on, especially coming off a game like Lies of P, where Lies of P kind of gave you no breaks. Enemies had zero chill in that game, and they would just come at you constantly and relentlessly. I feel like the AI and the decision making for the enemies in this game feel a lot more straightforward.
On enormous beasts despite them being pushovers, but even some of the more unique fights seem subpar compared to the bar set by recent Souls-likes.
It is quite unfortunate this game follows Lies of P.
There's also just a pretty sizable
timing.
layer of jank around this otherwise awesome package. I saw a few game crashes, had cool combat encounters ruined when enemies got stuck helplessly in the environment, was locked out of certain button commands like blocking for stretches of time, and more. Sometimes Lords of the Fallen has original Dark Souls energy in a pretty unflattering way. Playing with a friend can make some of those rough edges even more noticeable, since it introduces other questionable quirks, like how co-op partners are tethered to the host and get teleported if they stray too far, which is accompanied by a loading screen. But those loading screens often take just long enough for the host to have traveled out of sight again by the time you load back in, leading to yet another loading screen. But teaming up with a friend is still a good time, and what I've played of New Game Plus so far has me and my squad quite excited to go back through some of the areas and enemies.
That's crazy.
New lore, a whole new skill tree to experiment with, and of course, more difficult baddies to slay. That increased difficulty hasn't made any of the boss fights very challenging yet, which is a bummer, but the stretches between them are worth it on their own.
Alright, what's Travis's verdict?
Lords of the Fallen is a great Souls-like, and its killer new idea of swapping between two versions of the world to solve puzzles and slay enemies is an excellent twist to set it apart from the pack. That concept is unfortunately hamstrung a bit by numerous, highly annoying technical challenges and weak boss fights.
I feel like Lords of the Fallen 1 had the same problems, just more exacerbated. You know what I mean? Like, Lords of the Fallen was okay, but it had a lot of technical issues, presentation issues, and a lot of scuff. And I feel like this is just kind of like an improved, you know, a modern version of exactly that.
Awesome explorable areas and fantastic build crafting more than make up for those shortcomings. If, like me, you're a sucker for a quality action RPG, even amid a clear overabundance of them, then this reboot is well worth your time. For more, check out our reviews of Forza Motorsport and Assassin's Creed Mirage.
I think that was a very fair perspective, and he covered a lot in a very short period of time. That review was 10 out of 10. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.